opposing view, and where I'm absolutely appalled to this moment that they won't admit how wrong they were. You know, that was something I'm extremely proud of. And of course, if you take part in a conflict like that, you can expect to lose friends, but don't forget, you can expect to make them too. And the ones I've made are people who are liberation fighters. That can be better than some member of MoveOn.org, say.
I sometimes worry that you get entrenched in your beliefs.
Don't. Strike it from your list of anxieties. You have enough on your plate, man. Entrenched is where I'd hope to be, just as some people, it's funny, some people used to think that it was horrible to be called predictable. Even now, no one ever says that about you, intending it as a compliment, but I don't see why it's so pejorative. I'd like to think that anyone who cared to know what I think, or took the trouble to be interested, would, if asked, well, I wonder what Christopher's position is on the continued existence of the Saddam Hussein regime, would say, well, come on, I mean, what do you think he would think?
On the recent attack, Israel on the flotilla, I just wonder what you think about that.
Oh, well, that's a micro event, but it's a catalytic one for more major ones, I think. It's a small event in itself, but as with everything to do with Israel, it raises the question of the legitimacy of the Israeli state. That actually, I think, and I say in my longish chapter that I hope everyone will read, and by the way, if you'll buy it, I'll sign it, on Israel and the Jewish question, is the difference. Israel will never be a normal state. The desire for normality will continue to elude it. It will never be normal or safe to be Jewish either. And I hope it never is, by the way. I quote Leo Strauss as saying the point of the existence of the Jews is to show that there's no redemption. There is no salvation. That's what the Jewish people prove. So, by all means, people can say, well, it shows there should be no occupation. I've been saying that for 30 years. That the occupation of Gaza was a crime to begin with and was ended too late to do any real good. You can say all that. But what the people on that flotilla are saying is and the euphemists and supporters are saying, is we are the advance guard of the friends of Hamas and the friends of jihad. How they get themselves called activists, I don't really quite know. It's quite clever to get yourself just called that if you're a member of a group like International Answer, contributed a lot of which are the American Friends of North Korea, the American Friends of Saddam Hussein, the American Friends of Hafez al-Assad, the American Defenders of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Well, if they should be brave enough to stand by their principles and not be just told that they're activists.
Some people feel that
and the guests, the honoured guests of the thuggish government of Mr. Erdogan, who just a few weeks ago said, if anyone mentions the Armenian question in public ever again, I will expel all the remaining Armenians from Turkey. In other words, don't bring up the last genocide or I'll hurt them again. This man is an out-of-control thug, and he's posing as a defender of the human rights of the Palestinians. It makes me want to throw up things I've forgotten ever eating.
Some people feel that you misbehaved when you wrote the obituary of Edward Said.
In what respect?
In more than one way, but in one way...
Or in writing it at all, you mean?
In writing the obituary you wrote.
Well, you should enlarge.
That in some way you were criticizing him at a moment when he was dying?
No, the obituaries are not written when people are dying.
No, of course, right.
We've been through that.
We have.
He was an ex-professor at that point.
Do you think you were tough on him?
Sure. Yes, as I was, I should add.
In other words, I'm saying that in the chapter that you write at the end of your book, which brings us to Israel in some form or fashion, about
Yes.
Edward, perhaps you rewrite the last part of your friendship in a sweeter light than the one it was in at the end of his own life and your relationship with him.
One can't be the judge of how things appear to other people, but when I say that towards the end of his life, Edward referred in print in a Saudi-sponsored magazine in London to something that I had written about the liberation of Iraq and described the position taken by the author of these words as racist. That's not sweetening. Bring me an ounce of civic good apothecary to sweeten that. He was too fastidious, or perhaps too nervous, to actually put my name. He didn't say me, he just quoted the words. He didn't call me a racist to my face. But that didn't make it any better, and I thought, well, you have to take a thing like that seriously. I wouldn't have a racist for a friend, so I presume he doesn't want me for one either. It would be a terrible thing if a word like that lost its potency. So that was a froideur, which I hugely regret. And I would submit to anyone's arbitration whether or not those words could have that appropriate term attached to them. I would accept your verdict, if you like, but you don't seem to be suggesting that.
No, I'm suggesting that some friendships you describe in the book have been lost, and have in some way been lost in particular because of the great change that happened in you. I mean, you changed your mind from left to right and stayed there. You will excuse me for saying, Paul, that's facile. Of course, I forgive you completely.
Good. Well, you don't have to, but I mean, I ask your pardon. What is surely consistent, even if consistency isn't that great a virtue in me, is that I have an absolute loathing for theocracy in all its forms. The most repulsive, at least in the sense of being the most violent form that theocracy takes at the moment, is Islamic jihad. Follow me closely here. Edward, though he was a secularist and a non-believer, and not a Muslim in any case, was brought up as a Christian, could never quite bring himself to condemn this in round enough terms. If he would ever condemn Islamism, he would say it's terrible, but it's really the fault only of American policy that it exists. He couldn't condemn it ding an sich, as we say, as a thing in itself. And after a while, this reluctance, I knew this would happen, led to a breach between us. I thought it had to be condemned for its own sake and in its own name. And so the breach eventually occurred, but it wasn't initiated really by either of us. It was just something that had to happen. And yes, it's an infinite cause of pain to me that it happened towards the close of his life, but that wasn't controlled by either of us. Well, I've tried to write as carefully as I can about that and my very long association with him in the book, and I don't think I've dishonored him in any way. But I don't think that friendship requires the concealment or suppression or euphemization of differences of principle.
For those people who want to get a sense of you, should they turn very quickly to page 333 and 334 of the Proust questionnaire? Do you think that will enlighten them or just amuse them?
I hope both, perhaps. The Proust questionnaire is supposed to be accidentally revealing answers.
Right.
I think.
I
don't know which one you have in mind.
You can choose and pick whichever ones you want to read. I'm amused to have you read them because just a couple of weeks ago I was interviewing Bernard Pivot, the French talk show host who for about 25 years every Friday interviewed people from around the world, from Solzhenitsyn to Nabokov to Duras, etc. Lévi-Strauss, and had actually never been interviewed himself, but ended every apostrophe, which was watched every Friday by 5.5 million French-speaking people. It's quite a feat. He finished every apostrophe with